In 1815, Napoleon was finally defeated. He had tried to make a comeback, but his attempt at ruling France once again failed. This time, he would not escape with his life. Napoleon's enemies were ready for him, and they wanted justice for all the damage he had done. They took him far away from France to spend his last days. But how did this actually happen? Let's find out in today's episode. Napoleon's last escape. When Napoleon's enemies realized that their attempts to defeat him on the battlefield were failing, they decided to change their tactics. Instead of trying to kill him in battle, they would capture him. If they could get him into their hands, they could put an end to his reign of terror once and for all. Finally, Napoleon made a big mistake. While retreating from Waterloo, he thought about hiding at a friend's house. He went to Mont Saint Helena, but this was a terrible mistake. The owner of the house recognized him and immediately alerted the Duke of Wellington's men. Before he knew it, Napoleon was surrounded and captured. The British were very careful with their prisoner, because if anything happened to him, there would be a diplomatic incident. They handed him over to a small team of soldiers led by Major General Sir Neil Anderson. Together with Napoleon was another general, Marshal Jean de Soult. They both had to walk all the way to the coast. Napoleon was furious. He couldn't believe that his reign had come to an end like this. After walking for hours, they arrived at the coast where two ships awaited them. One of them was called the Northumberland, which was captained by Captain Frederick Lewis Maitland. He had orders to take Napoleon from Belgium to Portsmouth in England. The other ship was called the It was a much bigger vessel that was used to transport prisoners of war. Napoleon would have to sail on this one. Before getting on board, Napoleon asked what his fate would be if he surrendered. Maitland told him that he would be given fair treatment and that his life would be spared. This was all the reassurance Napoleon needed. He got on board the Bellerophon together with many other prisoners of war. The journey began, but Napoleon didn't know where they were actually going. His guards kept him in the dark about his destination. He was eager to find out, but they wouldn't tell him a thing. It was only after a few days that he found out. The ship had docked at Hampton Roads in Virginia. What had happened in Saint Helena? Napoleon was moved to St. James's Palace in London. For some time, the British people cheered as they were happy that their greatest enemy had been defeated. They even paraded him around the city so everyone could see him. But after this, he was taken to a house in exile at Longwood House. He lived here for more than 5 years until his death. It was a beautiful home, but Napoleon soon became bored. There was nothing for him to do, so he started writing his memoirs. But this didn't keep him busy for long. He yearned for freedom and wanted to return to France. But he knew this was impossible. When he learned that the British had plans to send him even further away, he threw a tantrum. He started screaming and yelling, and even threatened to end his own life. But no one listened. Soon, he was loaded on a ship bound for Africa. On May 15, 1815, he left England and headed towards Saint Helena. It is a small island in the Indian Ocean, and it was perfect for Napoleon's exile. No one would ever find him there, and he would be far away from Europe. Napoleon was furious. He hated the British and everything they stood for, so he refused to eat or drink anything that they provided. He wanted to starve himself to death instead of living in exile. But his body wouldn't let him do that. He ate even though he despised the food. But this wasn't enough. He still wanted to die. Then he came up with a new plan. He would eat too much and kill himself by stuffing his stomach. He ate gallons of food, but this also failed. His body couldn't digest all that food, and he felt sick to his stomach. When the ship arrived at St. Helena, he still hadn't given up. He continued his hunger strike and hoped that his body would just give up. But this didn't happen either. He had to come to terms with his new reality and accept that he would live out the rest of his life in exile. Life on St. Helena. When Napoleon finally agreed to eat again, the governor arranged a feast in his honor. The menu included many of his favorite foods such as macaroni, asparagus, chicken, pheasant, and even champagne. He was touched by the gesture and decided to forgive the British. They had treated him well so far, and he didn't want to ruin it now. He enjoyed the food and drank lots of wine. This brought back memories of the good old days when he was still in power. He was allowed to keep most of his belongings, including his silverware and fine clothes. He also brought books, plants, and seeds to the island, so he wouldn't be completely bored. He spent his days reading and drinking tea while watching the ocean. In the evenings, he would play cards with his guards, and they would gamble for high stakes. Sometimes he won, but most times he lost. Napoleon loved to win, so this made him furious. One day, Napoleon noticed that the British weren't treating all prisoners of war as well as they treated him. Some of them were shackled to walls and couldn't move freely. Others were forced to work hard without getting paid. Still, he understood why they had to treat these men harshly. These were actual soldiers who had fought against the British. He, on the other hand, was a former emperor who had already surrendered. Of course, they would treat him better. One of the prisoners, however, got special treatment. It was Friedrich von Schiller. He was a German soldier who had fought alongside the French, but he was injured during the Battle of Waterloo. Now he was stuck on the Bellerophon with Napoleon. The guards let him share Napoleon's cabin, but this caused problems. Schiller was arrogant and always spoke rudely about the French. Napoleon hated this, and one day he confronted Schiller. He told him to stop talking nonsense, or he would throw him overboard. Of course, he never carried out his threat, but it's safe to say that Schiller never spoke ill of the French ever again. Napoleon's last days. After spending almost 6 years in exile, Napoleon's health began to deteriorate rapidly. He had stomach pains every day, and sometimes they were so bad that he would be bedridden for weeks. He couldn't eat properly, and even simple tasks took lots of energy. He grew weaker and weaker, and his hair turned completely white. Even his worst enemies had to feel sorry for him. One night, Napoleon had a seizure and fell to the ground. His servants rushed to his side and called the doctor. He explained to them that Napoleon had died. Everyone was shocked. They had expected him to live longer. As Napoleon's condition worsened, his thoughts went back to France. He wondered how the country had fared in the years since he'd been exiled. Would the French people still love him? Or had they moved on and found a new hero? On May 5th, Napoleon died at the age of 51. It's not known exactly what caused his death, but it's believed that stomach cancer took his life. He was buried in Saint Helena, but later his remains were moved to Les Invalides in Paris. Today, he is remembered as one of the greatest French generals and emperors. But what do you think? Was Napoleon a hero or a villain? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching.